Okay, more with Pluggy's Revenge and background information to the American Revolution. So, you have the Northwest Indian War, which was caused by Benjamin Logan's campaign into Ohio, the Little Miami River. They're burning all these Shawnee towns. They burned Chillicothe twice in 1779 and in, or maybe that was the same year, 1786. But they burned all the corn crops. They burned all these Shawnee towns on the Little Miami River with George Rogers Clark, the great Indian butcher of the Northwest. So, Simon Kenton's bloodthirsty passion for land, because all these founding fathers, that's what they have. They got a passion for Amerindian land, or they want to maintain slavery. They want to have plantations. They have all these wealth, and it's all based on institutions which are unjust and not, fair, and they want to keep it unfair because it's unfair to their advantage. Simon Kenton, he had a bloodthirsty passion for land. He owned about 500,000 acres at one time before dying a poor man, which is odd how any of these folks get all this land and then die poor. George Rogers Clark, same thing. So, in 1802, Simon Kenton had asked Tecumseh, the Panther in the Sky, who refused to acknowledge any of the official treaties with the white government, to make a deal with him for the Shawnee lands between the Great Miami River and the Wabash River. So, with straight faces, they signed this. Tecumseh, the Panther in the Sky, agreed and accepted Simon Kenton's generous payment for land that eventually neither man could really ultimately own. But Kenton did pay Tecumseh for land between Great Miami River and the Wabash River. So I'm sure that land deal helped finance Tecumseh's future efforts. 12 years after Kentucky became an American state, on March 1st, 1803, Ohio was declared the 17th state. Kentucky was the 15th state. Ohio was the 17th state. Kentucky was inducted 1791, 12 years before Ohio was. So Kentucky is more American, was established as an American state before Ohio. For a time, all seemed well in the young state, but Simon Kenton was suspicious of Tecumseh. In March 1806, Simon Kenton was out riding with a friend near Urbana when he stumbled upon a secret Indian encampment where a war council was being held by Tecumseh, the Panther in the Sky. Simon Kenton sounded a general alarm among his neighbors and alerted Governor Edward Tippin of his concerns. When Tecumseh was confronted first by Simon Kenton and a delegation from Springfield, a few days later in a letter from Governor Tippin, and again at a banquet in the new state capital Chillicothe, where he was an honored guest, Tecumseh assured the Ohioans that his intentions were peaceful. Simon Kenton would have left the fighting to younger men, but he heard that a rumor that his son Simon Kenton Jr., baby Kenton, was serving under General William Henry Harrison, who was also an Indian butcher and also one of the worst presidents. He gave a long speech, dies of pneumonia, was only in office for a month. So, baby Kenton Jr., Simon Kenton II, had been captured by the Indians. So, once more, Simon Kenton picks up the bloody shirt, right, and his gun, and goes to war. In 1813, at the age of 58, Simon Kenton joined General Isaac Shelby's forces on their march to Canada to join William Henry Harrison's army and engage in the British General Henry Proctor and his Indian allies. Okay, so they got to go kill some Indians. Isaac Shelby was Kentucky's first governor, so there's a big, strong connection between Kentucky and the War of 1812. Also, the Mexican-American War, Taylor, he was President Taylor was from Louisville, and so he was big with the Trail of Tears guy, Andrew Jackson. So, and Polk was the first Andrew Jackson. Before Andrew Jackson, Polk started the Mexican-American War based on a lie, saying that Mexicans had killed Americans on American soil, which wasn't true. He actually said they killed Americans on the American soil. So, just his actual sentence has a tell in it. He lied, but most of the time, presidents lie in order to get to war. The President McKinley, he said that the ship in Cuba was bombed by Spanish, and that wasn't true. There was just some internal explosion. There's the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution by LBJ, bullshit, just to give him unlimited war powers, and of course the WMDs in Iraq. So lots of times presidents lie to us whenever they want to send the American people into war. And so that's the War of 1812. 1/3 to 2/3 of those that were killed were Kentuckians. So Kentuckians was very much in the center of all these Indian battles. They were the first settlements in the West. They were the first frontiersmen, pioneers are coming into this area trying to figure out how to figure how to live. But they didn't go with integration. They went with genocide. And so they were the first on the Manifest Destiny, the first towards the outreach of the West. And they were frontiersmen who was also warriors and militiamen too. So that was Kentucky. Kentucky's right at the very heart of the American Revolution. The American Revolution dictates what kind of people we are. We have these common virtues and this common national identity, and a lot of it came out of the American Revolution. But if we were lied about the American Revolution, what else have they been lying to us about? Simon Kenton was the one who identified Tecumseh's body at the Battle of Thames, right? He didn't want the body tore up, so that's great. Simon Kenton's a fucking bastard until Tecumseh's fucking dead, and then he shows a little bit of fucking heart. Simon Girty and Johnny Logan should have never let Simon Kenton go. The Shawnee was beating the shit out of him, making him run the gauntlet. Who knows what the fuck Simon Kenton actually did to the Shawnee for them to be torturing him so much as they did. And they was going to save him, and then they was going to kill him again, and then they saved him again, runs through the gauntlet 2 or 3 times. And eventually they let him go, right? So the Kentucky white man who killed Tecumseh used the fact that he killed Tecumseh as a bragging point in order to enter politics. In order to enter Kentucky politics. Simon Kenton moved to Zanesfield, Ohio, around 1820 during the last years of his life. Simon Kenton lived in poverty because of land ownership disputes and mismanagement of his money. He survived on a government pension of $20 a month. In 1836, Simon Kenton died in Logan County, ironically named not Johnny Logan, near Zanesfield, and was buried there. Died quietly, 1836, at the age of 81. In 1865, his remains were moved to Urbana. The state of Ohio constructed a monument to mark his grave in 1884. So he survived on a government pension of $20 a month, which is probably like $1 million back then. So I heard he died poor, but he seems like he died, okay. George Conotokarius Washington, the Indian slaughterer, the great town destroyer, a third generation plantation owner who never once set foot in Kentucky, showed little mercy when it came to his misbehaving soldiers. So George Washington, in his first service, he had deserters and plunderers flogged, and he threatened that if he could lay hands on one particular culprit, I would try the effect of 1,000 lashes. So George Conotokarius is for whipping his soldiers into submission and hanging them if it needs to be done. So whipping, hanging, all these sounds like the precursor to the institution of slavery. He's hanging people, he's whipping them. At another time, George Washington had a gallows near 40 feet high erected, which has terrified the rest exceedingly, and determined if he could be justified in the proceeding to hang 2 or 3. So Washington went to hang 2 or 3 of his men to put the rest of his men into submission. Colonel George Conotokarius Washington of the Virginia militia, seeking to terrify his untutored, undisciplined ragamuffin soldiers into obedience, builds a 40-foot high gibbet. So a 40-foot high gibbet. I'm gonna hang you 40 feet up in the air so everybody can see. Soon after, he sentences 14 of his men to death for desertion and insubordination. So either they're running away or they're saying, no, we're not going to do what you want. Though he will eventually spare 12 from the noose, he still punishes them with absolute fierce and shocking floggings, an average of 600 lashes per prisoner. So 12 of them get 600 lashes, 2 of them are get hung. George Conotokarius Washington made a point of hanging people in public. Ron share now rights to deter others. It's an expression of his blazing temper. It's also a result of his experience as an explorer and soldier in the Virginia wilderness, which darkened his view of human nature. George Conotokarius' lifelong practice will be to see people as motivated more by force than kindness. When he hangs his first man, the year 1756, Virginia is still a British colony until Conotokarius, Washington, was 24 years old. So these young psychopathic white people, George Rogers Clark got the control of the entire Kentucky militia at 1776 when he was 24 years old. So you're giving these young cocky punks, you know, to license to do as they please, and he did as he pleased. You know, that's killing your own people. That's what Lenin did. That's what Hitler did. Washington is no better than some of the worst barbaric genocidal maniacs in all of human history. In the Benedict Arnold affair, when the captured British spy John Andre, a handsome and sympathetic figure, pleaded to be executed like a gentleman by a firing squad, George Washington turned his back. Despite the wrenching protest of Hamilton and Lafayette, he ordered Andre hanged in full view of the army as an example to his own soldiers and a message to the British. Policy, he explained to the French Admiral Rochambeau, required a sacrifice. So for his policy to be put into place, somebody had to die. That was the Washington way. That was Conotokarius. So George Washington way. In March 1792, 15 ships take off from Canada with Thomas Peters and 1,100 African slaves who fought for the British, going to Freetown in Sierra Leone in Africa. George Conotokarius Washington, also known as Hanadaguyus, which is known as the Town Destroyer, had become famous as an Indian killer during the French, British, and Indian War. George Conotokarius and Hanadaguyus. So Hanadaguyus Conotokarius Washington, risen quickly through the militia ranks by butchering Indian communities and burning their homes. The father of America massacred men, women, and children like King George's 1779 Sullivan campaign against the Iroquois, taking dozens of such My Lai massacres for George Conotokarius Washington to become a hero. And again, just thinking about the policy of George Washington, how he hangs deserters. Woodrow Wilson was an imperialist. McKinley was imperialist. You know, all these people are imperialists and they're murderers. But what I want to say was that they talk about how policy required a sacrifice. So one of the biggest things with World War I that I remember is that Eugene Debs is sentenced to prison for 10 years. Eventually he just serves a couple years, but he was sent to prison for 10 years because he spoke out against World War I, because he talked. And that just shows like how totalitarian American society has been. Yeah, we got the illusion of freedom, but if you don't go along with your war president during the patriotic fervor, then you're not an American, right? You're a traitor. So George Washington 1779 Sullivan campaign against the Iroquois was horrible. Washington, he had, well, there's lots of things. Let's just, okay. When his army entered the country, the Six Nations Iroquois, the Seneca, called him the Hanadaguyus. So Hanadaguyus was called by, that's what he was called by the Seneca, by the Iroquoians, for being a town destroyer. It translates as town taker, burner of towns, devourer of villages, or he destroys the town. Even years later, when that name was heard, women looked behind them and turned pale, and children clinged close to the necks of their mothers. When his army came to the Onondaga town, they put to death all the women and children. This is George Washington, excepting some of the young women that they carried away for the use of their soldiers. So, again, we're seeing rape of the women. Hernando de Soto, Columbus. Columbus had a whole army of pedophiles. There's a weird passage by Moses where he says to his warring generals to have to do as he pleases with the unwed women and girls. So, you know, it's a culture of rape. There's a rape culture. There's psychopathy influences. Being a psychopath means you cannot empathize with somebody. You can only murder another person if you don't empathize with them. If you can't put yourself in their shoes, it is so much easier to do damage to them. But if you look at yourself as them, one world, one love, we're all the same, you can never harm somebody the way George Washington harmed people.